good morning, good afternoon, good evening. You're listening to the Thai Expat Daily Show. I'm your host Kieran Mack and thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like this video if you're watching us on YouTube and please do subscribe. We're also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music and a host of other podcast players. Now that that's all done, let's jump into today's show. Well, hello there and welcome back to the Thai Expat Daily Show. Today is Friday, the 8th of April 2022, and we're going to start off with the first story of the day, which is in relation to inflation and the highest it's been in 13 years. Thailand's inflation in March increased to 5.73% year on year, which is the highest monthly rise in 13 years, largely due to the price increases for oil, electricity and food because of the war in Ukraine, according to the Director of the Commerce Ministry's Office of Trade Policy and Strategy, Ronnarong Poonphiphat. The average inflation rate for the first quarter was 4.75%, and the office has adjusted the inflation projection for the whole year from 0.7% to 2.4% to 4.5%. Based on the assumption that Thailand's growth rate projection is 3.5% to 4.5%, crude oil prices averages $90 to $110 per barrel, and the exchange rate of the Thai baht against the US dollar is somewhere between 32 and 34 baht. The price of energy-related goods for March increased by 32.5%. This included a 31.43% rise in the oil price, a 39.95% rise in electricity charges, a 10% increase in vegetable prices, a 5.75% increase in meat prices, a 6% rise in the price of dairy products, and an 8.16% increase in the price of street food, such as noodles and rice with curry. Ronnarong said inflation in April is likely to increase further due to the war in Ukraine, which is expected to intensify the fluctuation in global oil prices and a rise in cooking gas prices. The prospect of stagflation, he said, will not be an issue of concern if Thailand's economy continues to grow with tourism and export expansion, and if the government continues to roll out economic stimulus packages. And moving along, single-use plastic and styrofoam products banned from Thai national parks. Effective Wednesday, all single-use plastic and styrofoam items are banned from all of Thailand's national parks. According to the announcement by the Department of National Parks, Wildlife and Plant Conservation, which was published in the Royal Gazette yesterday and became enforceable today, all single-use plastic and styrofoam items, such as plastic bags, which are less than 36 microns thick, plastic glasses, spoons, forks, straws, etc., are not allowed in national parks. Violators can face a maximum fine of up to 100,000 baht if convicted. The ban is intended to protect the wildlife in the park, including marine parks, from the danger posed by such items, which are frequently left in the environment by visitors. There have been many cases of sea turtle carcasses being washed ashore, which were found to have plastic bags in their stomachs, or dead deer whose stomachs were found to be full of plastic bags discarded containing food by careless tourists. Corals were also found to be covered in sheets of plastic. Although convenience and department stores in the country have generally stopped providing free single-use plastic bags to their customers, they are still widely used by smaller vendors. Now, in other news, the NHRC rules limitation of free expression a violation of human rights. The National Human Rights Commission has ruled that restriction number 11, contained in the announcement 27 issued under the emergency decree by the Thai government, which bars media from disseminating information deemed to be distorted, misleading or fear-mongering, is a breach of human rights and must be revoked. The NHRC decision was announced today is in response to a petition jointly filed by Thailand's 6 major media organisations seeking reconsideration of the restriction, which was issued by Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha in July last year. They argue that the restriction is an infringement of free expression, which is protected by the Constitution. According to the restriction, violators are liable to jail terms of no more than 2 years and or a fine of no more than 40,000 baht on conviction. The petitioners are the National Press Council of Thailand, the News Broadcasting Council of Thailand, the Thai Journalists Association, the Thai Broadcast Journalists Association, the Society for Online News Providers, and the National Union of Journalists in Thailand. One of the commissioners, Wasana Pailakli, told a press conference this morning that the commission met on Monday to consider the petition together with information from relevant agencies and related laws as well as the principles of human rights. He said that the commission agreed that free expression by means of speech, writing, publication, advertisements or other means of communication, as well as freedom in disseminating news or opinions in line with the media's ethical conduct rules, are protected by the Constitution and guaranteed by the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. The Commission agreed that there are, however, limitations to free expression, if necessary for the respect of the rights and reputation of the others, the protection of national security, public order or morals, but such limitations must be proportional, said Wasan. He said that the Commission felt that restriction number 11 contains provisions which are vague, overly broad, and which can be interpreted in a way that dissemination of news or opinion which are factual but may cause public panic are against the law, regardless of whether such news or opinion are true or beneficial to the public. The restriction, number 11, according to the Commission, is a violation of the rights of free expression and does not correspond with the spirit of the law, which is actually intended to control the spread of COVID-19. Wasan said the Commission's ruling will be submitted to the Operations Centre for COVID-19 Situation Administration, which will have 60 days to revoke the restriction. Now that leads us into one of today's top stories. Suvarnabhumi Airport arrivals up since RT-PCR test lifted. Suvarnabhumi Airport has seen a sharp rise in the number of international arrivals since the requirement for pre-flight COVID-19 tests was lifted. Thailand's main gateway airport in Samut Prakan province reported an average 11,623 travellers from overseas destinations from Friday to Monday, a 66% rise from the average in March of 7,003 visitors a day. Airport General Manager Kittipong Kittakachorn attributed the rise to the government's decision to scrap pre-travel RT-PCR tests for visitors coming under Test and Go, Sandbox and Quarantine schemes from last Friday, April 1st. Mr. Kittipong expected the number would continue to increase as the eased travel restrictions led to more flights landing at Suvarnabhumi. The airport serviced 141 inbound flights a day on average this month, compared with 137 landings last month. Shares in Airports of Thailand plc, which operates Suvarnabhumi Airport and 5 other international airports, were up 1 baht or 1.5% from 66.50 on Friday to 67.50 on Tuesday. The government's decision to end pre-travel tests is aimed at attracting more holiday makers to Thailand to help the COVID-devastated tourism sector recover. The Bank of Thailand's latest tourism outlook on March 30th remained unchanged. The central bank's Monetary Policy Committee kept its projection of foreign tourist visitors at 5.6 million this year on the expected improvements in the Omicron variant situation in the country and the limited impact of the Russia-Ukraine war on the Thai tourism sector. Now, as Bangkok boasts about a 66% rise in numbers from March, eased measures for Phuket failed to draw any traction. Warning signs have already started to show following the new eased measures for international tourists to enter the country introduced last Friday, with a very slow response among tourists returning to the island province of Phuket. Unlike previous editions of introducing eased entry measures, when government officials have highly promoted how effective the reduced restrictions have been in boosting the number of tourists coming to Phuket, as of yesterday, local officials still had yet to make the usual proclamation of success. Now, according to the Phuket News, under the new requirements, the Thai government no longer requires tourists to be tested for COVID-19 by RT-PCR method. The mandatory COVID insurance has been reduced from 50,000 to 20,000, and the mandatory tests on day 5 of a tourist stay under the Test and Go scheme and the Sandbox entry scheme can now be conducted by an ATK test instead of RT-PCR method. However, all other requirements remain the same, including the widely criticised Thailand Pass application system for international arrivals to be issued a certificate of entry. Also in effect are mandatory quarantine measures for arrivals deemed to be high-risk contacts who are not actually infected. Now, since the April 1 measures came into effect, the number of international arrivals has increased, but only to about 3,400 a day, a long way from helping tourism officials reach their touted goal of 10 million international tourists this year, heralded only 1 month ago. The month of March saw the already small number of daily arrivals plunge even further following Russia's invasion of Ukraine on February 24th, with the number of new arrivals hovering in the 3,000s, sinking to an average of just over 1,000 each day. While the Tourism Authority of Thailand continued to promote that more than 430,000 tourists have arrived under COVID entry schemes since November 1 last year, the number of arrivals to Phuket has never exceeded more than 4,051 on any one day. Tourism Minister Poonphiphat Ratchabakaran, sensing the impact was coming, late last month recognised that tourism officials had previously forecast 10 million arrivals this year, but noted in an interview with the surge in Omicron infections and the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the tally might only reach 7 million. Tourism revenue could reach 30% of levels recorded in 2019 this year, before improving to 50% next year and fully recovering by 2024, he said. Now, before we get into this story and have a look at what's been going on both in Bangkok and Phuket, somebody asked me the last day what were the infection rates for travellers entering Thailand over the last few months. So, November, the infection rate was 0.13%. December 0.45%, January was 3.73%, February 2.25%, last month March was 0.58%, and as of today, the 8th of April, the number is approximately 0.25%. Now, when you add all that up and look through the three different programs for entering Thailand, the Test and Go program came out at an average of 0.21%, Sandbox was 0.63%, and the what they call the Happy Quarantine was 2.29%. Now, those figures come from the Ministry of Public Health. Now, the story today I find quite interesting in relation to entry into Bangkok, and basically they've chosen to showcase the numbers over a long weekend. And in general, here in Thailand, from studying the figures and the arriving numbers since pretty much July 1st when the Phuket Sandbox started, there is always an uptick in arrivals over a weekend, a Friday, Saturday and Sunday. It's no surprise that at Suvarnabhumi airport that the numbers are increased when you look at it over a weekend. So I feel that these numbers are a little bit misleading. Also, April in general in Thailand is a busier month. We have Easter holidays in Europe where families tend to travel to Thailand to take a break, enjoy the sunshine, and partake, of course, in the Thai New Year, the Songkran festival. And it has always been a pretty busy month. However, their boasting about it being busier than March, I think, is a little bit ridiculous because, March is nothing to be boasting about either. Now, they also talk about there's been 141 flights. I think it works out at about 82, 83 people per flight arriving in Thailand. That to me is not a great number. And to be quite honest, I find it hard to understand how airlines continue to fly with planes that are practically empty. Now, Phuket numbers seem a lot more realistic, and Phuket, since even the Sandbox back in July 1st, has never really seen a huge increase in people coming into it. Now, they spoke at one stage that they were expecting 10,000 a day, and they have never even come close to that. I think the article states that it was just over 4,000 is the most that has ever come through the airport on a single day since pretty much July 1st. So the numbers are not there, and trying to somehow show that, well, we've reduced the requirement on entering the country, that's going to lead to more of an increase is a little bit nonsensical and ridiculous. Most people know at this stage the way to increase tourism in this country, if that is their end goal, because it seems like they talk so much about it, but they don't do the one thing that would increase tourist revenue, and that's to scrap the whole damn thing. Now, there's a story coming up about Prayut, and he's talking about COVID, and we'll go into that after that. But in general, officials here in this country seem to be abandoning, or at least not focusing on the one thing that will increase tourism revenue in this country and start to get the country up and going, start to get it moving along, and that's to abandon the Thailand Pass and whatnot. Now, of course, we know that there's talk about May 1st, they may get rid of the RT-PCR test on day one, but there's no guarantee to that at all. And then talk about June 1st, the Thailand Pass being scrapped. But of course, that's all dependent on how Songkran goes. Now, right now, today, we had 27,000 COVID cases in the country, with approximately then 26,000 ATK tests positive. So we're all talking about nearly 60,000 cases here in the country since yesterday. So the numbers are on the way up. Deaths have also been rising and creeping up to that 100 mark, which they say will be the number that will determine whether or not the country moves forward with its plan to reduce restrictions. As I said before, my fear is that they're going to use this Songkran to draw out this whole game and continue to reap misery on hospitality businesses, on the general working man. And I hope it isn't that way, but I do feel that there is no real desire from this government to get on with things and to live with COVID like they have spoken about so many times. But we're just going to have to see. And now we're going to jump into the next story of the day. COVID war far from won, PM says. Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha has admitted that the end of the COVID-19 outbreak in Thailand is nowhere near in sight and stressed the need for at-risk groups, now including unvaccinated young children, to get their COVID-19 shots as soon as possible. The Premier wants to warn the public that the outbreak is unlikely to end soon and has expressed concern about the rising numbers of infections and deaths among young children, government spokesman Thanakorn Wangbongkanchana said yesterday. Families with children aged 5 and over should get them vaccinated to lower the chance of them developing more severe symptoms if infected with the coronavirus, said General Prayut in a statement relayed by the spokesman. Several young children who died after contracting COVID-19 were found by health authorities to have not received any vaccination against the virus, said the spokesman. General Prayut has urged those who have already recovered to continue observing their health carefully and watch for any sign of long COVID, which may include muscle pains, a persistent cough, anxiety and depression. In another development, 5 medical organisations issued a joint statement emphasising the need for people to get a booster shot and even a second booster while the country is still battling the health threat associated with the highly transmissible Omicron variant. A booster in addition to 2 regular jabs has been proven to further reduce the risk of hospitalisation and infection of the lungs, which may require treatment in an intensive care unit and the use of a ventilator, the organisation said. They are the Royal College of Physicians of Thailand, the Infectious Disease Association of Thailand, the Preventative Medicine Association of Thailand, and the Society of Critical Care Medicine and the Thoracic Society of Thailand. Now next up, South Korea are to increase international flights starting May. South Korea said on Wednesday it would add hundreds of international flights per week beginning in May, continuing to ease anti-COVID measures as its Omicron variant declines. From next month, the government will authorise a further 100 weekly flights for such destinations as the United States, Europe, Thailand and Singapore, where quarantine exemptions and visa-free entry are possible, Minister of the Interior and Safety John Hae-chol said. The 100 more weekly flights will be added in June and a further 300 in July, the Transport Ministry said. Only 420 international flights a week currently serve South Korea, down from 4,714 before the pandemic. Demand for overseas visits is expected to increase as countries that have passed the peak of the Omicron wave have eased quarantine policies, Jeon said in a statement. South Korean cases have been declining for about 3 weeks. The country is considering scrapping most pandemic-related curbs later this month, including an obligation to wear masks outdoors, after already dropping national vaccine mandates and mandatory quarantine for vaccinated travellers arriving from overseas. The Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency reported 286,294 new cases for Tuesday, down from a record 621,000 cases in mid-March. Shares in Korean Air rose as much as 1.7% after the announcement versus a 0.9% drop in the wider market. And finally, the Phuket News Daily Report. Phuket gold shop robber probe nets 3.7 million cash, online gambling arrests. The arrest of the Myanmar man who robbed a gold store in Phuket town last year has led to the arrest of 2 wanted men for operating an illegal online gambling website and the seizure of 3.7 million in cash, police announced today. 3 kilograms of ice seized in Phuket raids. Phuket Provincial Police have announced the arrests of 3 men charged with collaborating as a network to sell narcotics, with more than 3 kilograms of crystal meth and more than 18,000 meth pills seized. Military conscription draw underway in Phuket. The lucky draw for mandatory military service for men over 21 years of age is underway in Phuket, with 206 men from Rasada and Rawai presenting themselves at the indoor sports stadium at Sapanhin yesterday. And finally, drive safely during Songkran, urges Phuket Governor. Phuket Governor Ronnarong has urged drivers taking to the roads to return home for the Songkran holidays to celebrate the Thai New Year to drive safely. But ultimately, with this story or anything else that stood out to you today, I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. Because yes, this is a news show, but it's also a conversation. Now keep that conversation going. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, share the video, and do all the good stuff that does help that YouTube algorithm. But ultimately, my name is Kieran Mack. You've been listening to the Thai Expat Daily Show, and we will see you next time.